Daniel Wren receives a letter informing him that he has inherited a property called Heroic House. The letter comes from a law firm representing the estate of Silas Wren, an uncle Daniel never knew existed. Daniel is skeptical. He was adopted and knows little about his biological family. But he's broke, stuck in writer's block, and the house is free. He decides to drive out and see it, thinking it might even inspire a new book. First glimpse of Heroic House. The house is hidden deep in the countryside, surrounded by dead trees and fog-covered hills. The road narrows to a gravel path. No GPS signal. Crows circle overhead. The house emerges slowly through mist, 3 stories tall. Black brick, iron gates rusted shut. It's silent. Too silent. Even nature seems to avoid it. Windows are broken. Paint peels like skin. Vines curl like fingers around the porch rail. Meeting the groundskeeper, Daniel meets Elias, the ancient, part-time groundskeeper who stays in a shed behind the house. He doesn't speak much, just stares with one cloudy eye. When Daniel asks how long the house has been empty, Elias says, "Empty." "No, sir. Never empty. Just waiting." First walk through, the front door creaks open on its own. Inside, the house smells of mildew, old books, and something faintly sweet, like rotting flowers. Cobwebs hang like curtains. Dust covers everything, but the furniture is intact. Old portraits watch Daniel as he moves. He finds a grandfather clock that still ticks, even though it's not wound. The office, on the second floor, he finds his uncle's study, a room filled with journals, old photographs, and a typewriter. One journal has a page dog-eared. The last entry reads, "I hear it behind the walls again. Tapping. Whistling. It sounds like her, but she's been dead 50 years. Daylight silence. Daniel woke up late the next morning, wrapped in a blanket of uneasy sleep. The fire had long since gone out, yet the ashes in the hearth were still warm. He noted it, half awake, and chalked it up to thick insulation or some old trick of the stonework. The morning was quiet. Too quiet. No birds. No wind. No sound of leaves brushing against the windows. Even his footsteps felt muffled. He brewed coffee in the kitchen, an old stovetop kettle, somehow still working, and tried to shake the sense of stillness wrapping around him. A fog still clung to the windows, turning everything outside into a vague blur. 2. The first whisper, while exploring the house further. Daniel entered a long corridor he hadn't noticed before. The wallpaper was torn here, revealing blackened wood beneath. Pictures hung crooked on the walls, portraits with eyes scratched out. Then, just as he reached for one to straighten it, he heard it. He doesn't know he's home, a childlike whisper. Right behind him, he froze. Slowly turned. No one there, he whispered back, unsure why. Who's there? Only silence. 3. Riddles in the dark. That night, while reading in the study, he heard it again. A whisper like breath sliding through cracks in the wall. But this time, it said more. If a house forgets, where do the memories go? Daniel stood up, trying to locate the source. It felt like it came from every wall at once. Another whisper. Ask the floor why it groans. Ask the mirror why it weeps. He rushed out of the study and into the hallway, where he saw the mirror from before, the one above the fireplace. A crack had widened, spreading across the glass like a spiderweb. Back at the house, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the whisper. That night, the ticking of the grandfather clock grew louder, echoing up the stairwell like a heartbeat. Tick, tick, tick. Then, soft tapping behind the walls, then scratching. He pressed his ear to the paneling in the hallway and heard whispering again. You're not him. But you wear his skin. Suddenly, every door on the second floor slammed shut at once. He ran downstairs, heart pounding, only to find a message written in dust on the mirror. Do you remember now? Sick. The riddle deepens. Daniel searched Silas's journals that night, looking for answers. One passage stood out. The house speaks when it's lonely. It whispers truths in riddles and lies in plain speech. Listen long enough, and it will make you part of its story. As he closed the journal, he heard a soft giggle upstairs. Childlike. Echoing, the mirror flickered again, just for a second, showing a figure standing inside the hallway, head tilted, arms hanging limp. But when Daniel turned around, nothing, only a new whisper in the walls. ask the house what happened to the first one who listened too long. Closing beat, Daniel tried to write that night. Just a few pages, but the typewriter in the office typed by itself. One sentence, "You were born in this house, Daniel. You just forgot." He sat in silence, listening to the walls breathe around him. Then, as the clock struck 3:13 again, the mirror began to hum. An uneasy morning, Daniel awoke drenched in sweat, his dream already fading. He only remembered a mirror and hands, too many hands, pressing against the glass from the inside. The house was quieter than ever, even the usual whispering behind the walls had stopped. The silence felt heavier, almost like the house was holding its breath. While making coffee, Daniel noticed a cold draft seeping from the upstairs hallway. A place he hadn't fully explored yet. On the second floor, behind a faded velvet curtain, Daniel found a narrow hall with peeling floral wallpaper. At the end was a single door, bolted shut from the outside. The wood was splintered and warped, and the paint had long since bubbled away. Deep scratch marks gouged the surface, claw-like, desperate, inhuman. Next to the door, scrawled in red crayon or faded blood, were the words, "She's still watching." Daniel felt something stir behind the door, movement or breath, but when he leaned closer, all he heard was silence. And then, a faint hum, like someone humming a lullaby out of tune. Later that day, armed with a crowbar and his mounting obsession, Daniel pried the door open. The air behind it rushed out cold and dry, stale like a forgotten tomb. Inside was a small room, perfectly square. The walls were lined with deep gouges, not just on the door but floor and ceiling. Something had been trapped here, but the centerpiece was unmistakable. A tall mirror, covered with a thick, white sheet. Daniel stepped inside, heart racing. The light bulb above flickered. He reached out and pulled the sheet away. The mirror's return. It was the same mirror from his dream, cracked down the center, but now, the cracks were bleeding, a thick, black ichor slowly running down the glass, vanishing before it reached the floor. Reflected in the mirror, Daniel didn't see himself. He saw a girl, pale and gaunt, standing behind him with empty eyes and a mouth sewn shut. Her skin was translucent, almost like wet parchment. But when he turned around, nothing. He looked back. The girl was closer in the reflection now. Her eyes slowly opened, black as ink. Something inside the glass twitched. Words appeared on the mirror's surface, written in fog from nowhere, "Don't forget again." The room began to shake, walls groaning, mirror trembling. Daniel backed out, slamming the door shut. But the humming followed him down the hall. It echoed through the house now, through the vents, the walls, the pipes, la 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 la, la. Back in the study, Daniel tore through Silas's journals. One entry, almost completely ripped from the book, still had a single line scrawled hastily, "The girl in the mirror is not a ghost. She's a memory with teeth." Another line followed in a different hand, one Daniel didn't recognize, "Whatever you do, don't let her out again." That night, all the mirrors in the house began to misbehave. His reflection would move slightly after he did. Sometimes, his reflection smiled when he didn't. In the bathroom mirror, he saw a second face behind his shoulder for only a moment. A child's face. Smiling, the sealed room remained closed. But Daniel knew she was watching now, and waiting. The first nightmare, it started that night. Daniel fell asleep on the worn couch in the study, his journal open beside him. He dreamed he was back in the sealed room, but it was different now, alive. The wallpaper peeled like skin. The mirror pulsed like a heartbeat, and she was there, the girl with the sewn mouth. This time she wasn't standing still. She was reaching toward him, tears streaking her pale face, her sewn lips trembling as if trying to speak. When Daniel moved to touch the mirror, his hand bled. He woke with a scream, sweat-soaked and shaking. The mirror above the fireplace was fogged. A small handprint was pressed on the inside. Daniel stumbled back. No one else was in the house. He searched every room, breath shallow, heart hammering. Nothing. But as he passed the upstairs hallway, he froze. For a split second, a flicker of white just beyond the corner. Like the hem of a nightgown, then gone. Daniel's journal, which he'd left on the table, was no longer blank. A new page had been written in. She cries because she remembers. You bleed because you forgot. He didn't write it. He was sure. Each night, the dreams worsened, the house burned, but the girl never screamed. Daniel walked through water that rose up the walls, and eyes opened in every mirror. the girl would point at him, silently pleading, shaking, as if she knew him. Then the dream would always end the same way. A voice, deep and hollow, behind him, "You let her in." It wasn't just in dreams anymore. Once, he saw her in the hallway mirror, not moving, but when he looked away and back, she was closer. Another night, he passed by a mirror and saw his own face missing, replaced by hers. When he took a photograph of the study for a blog post, she appeared in the reflection of the window, sitting in the corner, watching. No matter how many times he deleted the photo, it kept reappearing. One morning, Daniel found a small wooden music box on the floor outside the locked room. He'd never seen it before. It wound by itself. The lullaby it played was the same tune the whispers had been humming. When he opened it, inside was a slip of yellowed paper, with faded writing, "She remembers your name now." The house had grown colder, windows fogged without reason, footsteps echoed in empty rooms, voices whispered directly into his ear. Even when he was alone, Daniel no longer trusted sleep. But when he stayed awake too long, the mirrors began to pulse. His reflection would speak words he didn't say. Sometimes, it cried, and always. She watched, the girl, the memory with teeth. Daniel couldn't sleep. The girl in the mirror haunted him still, crying, reaching, accusing. The music box played itself in the middle of the night, winding up with no hands. He smashed it. The next morning, it was back on the shelf, untouched. He needed answers. In the attic, beneath moldy tarps and broken furniture, Daniel found an old wooden trunk. The initials SM, Silas Morvan, were burned into the top. Inside, journals, letters, strange hand-drawn sigils, and a rusted iron key. The journals were thick and angry, pages smeared with ink, scratched with trembling handwriting. They began mundane, then quickly spiraled into paranoia and dread. The house is older than the town. Older than memory. It speaks in mirrors, moves through cracks. It isn't a ghost, it's a wound that remembers being alive. It came before. It will come again. Daniel flipped to a page marked with a strip of skin-thin parchment. One line chilled his blood. "I bound it once. But binding is not forever. Blood fades. And the boy, he is the last key." The boy? Daniel's hands trembled. Buried in the bottom of the trunk was an old family tree, hand-drawn, torn and water-damaged. Names had been scratched out. But one remained legible, Daniel Morvan. The dates matched his birthday. And beside it, scrawled in a different ink, "He must never enter the mirror." Daniel sat back in shock. His parents had always been vague about Uncle Silas. But now it was clear, Silas hadn't left the house to Daniel as a gift, it had been a warning. Or a trap, maybe both. Among the scattered pages was a diagram, the same symbol carved into the floor of the sealed room, now partly erased by time. It wasn't just decoration, it was a binding circle. The mirror had been placed inside it. Silas had used blood magic to trap something behind the glass. A presence, an entity, not the girl, something else. Something using her. It shows you her face so you'll pity it. But it wears her like a glove. Daniel reread the final words in the last journal. "When the bloodline forgets, the mirror remembers. And it will open again." That night, Daniel had a different kind of dream. He was a child, his childhood home, a storm outside. He stood before a mirror, and a man, Silas, was yelling behind him, drawing a circle of salt around the glass. "Don't look at her, Danny. Don't answer her." But Daniel, small, innocent, had already touched the glass. The girl had smiled. When Daniel awoke, he was standing in front of the sealed room again, barefoot, holding the rusted iron key, and behind the door, the mirror was whispering his name. The discovery began with a water leak. Rain hammered the roof that evening. Daniel followed the dripping sound through a narrow hallway behind the kitchen, one he hadn't noticed before. The wallpaper there was old and soft with rot. As he peeled it back, he found something stranger, a mural, hidden beneath the paper, a family portrait, painted directly onto the plaster in faded oils. 15 people, men, women, children, stood before the same house. This house. The names were painted below their feet, though most had faded, but one was clear, Daniel, not him. A boy from another time. Same first name. Same sharp chin. Same eyes, That night, Daniel tore through the journals again. In the oldest one, from 1812, he found records of a man named Thaddeus Morvan, builder of Heroic House. Thaddeus claimed the land was given to him in a dream. He woke one morning with the map drawn on parchment beside his bed, not in his own handwriting. He built the house over a hill of bones, he wrote, it spoke through reflection, promised me legacy. Promised me sons. Promised it would keep us. One by one, the family died in the house. Always tragic, always strange, falls, fever, madness. But one always remained. One always stayed, and every time, the survivor's name, Daniel. Behind the house, Daniel found a fenced area buried beneath vines and thorns. The headstones were worn. Nearly erased, he brushed the moss from one. Eliza Morvan, died 1873, the mirror took her. Another, Jonah Morvan, died 1922, he looked too long. And another, Silas Morvan, no death date, only one grave was freshly disturbed. A shovel lay nearby, the marker read, Daniel Morvan, date of death, unknown. The mirrors inside grew more restless. When Daniel passed, they no longer waited. They spoke, in voices he recognized, we stayed. You have to stay, don't leave us alone with it. It chooses who remains. You were always going to be the last. The final journal had one last message, it doesn't trap you. It invites you. The house doesn't kill, it chooses. It keeps a Morvan so it doesn't have to find another. If you stay, it sleeps. Daniel dropped the book, it all made sense. His uncle didn't pass down the house out of love. He passed it down because his time was ending. The house had let Silas go, now it had picked Daniel. The house was waiting for him to accept. Daniel tore through the house, desperate for answers. He followed a pulsing sound, like a heartbeat through the floor. In the cellar, he found a trapdoor, hidden beneath rotting crates. It opened to stairs that spiraled down, far deeper than any foundation should go. At the bottom, a chamber lined with mirrors, some were cracked. Some pristine. All hummed softly, like sleeping mouths, and in each mirror, he saw someone else, dozens of faces. All looking at him. All versions of himself, but older. Or younger. Or, wrong, they whispered in unison, we stayed. Daniel began forgetting things. At first, it was small, where he'd left his coat. Whether he'd eaten. The day of the week, then names, his old apartment. His favorite book. His mother's voice. He found post-it notes he'd written himself, on mirrors, doors, his own skin, you are Daniel. You live in Heroic House. Do not sleep in the study, he didn't remember writing them. The girl in the mirror appeared again, but this time, she wasn't crying, she was smiling, and she spoke, how long until you forget too? Daniel tried to ask her name, she paused. Blinked, confused, I had a brother, I think I was, she looked around, panicked. Her eyes blurred, her skin rippled like water, no. No, it's taking me again, she screamed, but no sound came out, her image flickered, then vanished. He touched one mirror. And it pulled him in. For a moment, Daniel stood in a house like his, but decayed, more so. A version of Heroic lost in time. There were people wandering the halls, pale. Empty-eyed. They wore old clothes from every era. Some smiled blankly. Others whispered. One brushed past him and whispered, what was my name? Another said, I had a child. I think, did I? The house had hollowed them out, fed on their pasts. Their minds, they weren't ghosts, they were memories, too faded to remember themselves. At the heart of it all stood a tall mirror. Towering, perfectly polished, a single phrase etched in its frame, the house remembers. So you don't have to. Daniel saw his uncle reflected there, young again. Smiling, you'll stay, we all do. It's peaceful, once you forget, you won't feel lost. You won't feel anything. Daniel felt the tug. It would be easy to let go, no fear, no guilt, no pain, just the quiet comfort of being no one. Daniel returned from the chamber beneath the house, skin cold with fear and sweat. The whispering in the walls was louder now, echoing with distorted voices. "Don't go, we remember you. It's almost over." He stumbled into the room where it all started. The locked room on the second floor. The one with the first mirror, the one the girl appeared in, it was waiting. That cracked, rotting glass pulsed like a heart. Daniel picked up a rusted chair, took a deep breath, and hurled it at the mirror. It shattered, a million shards exploding into the air like falling stars. The house went silent. Then, like a long-held breath had been released, everything shifted. The walls began to weep, dark streaks ran down the wallpaper like veins. Floorboards curled and splintered. Paint blistered, a groaning sound rose from the foundation, deep and awful, like the house was waking up in pain. Daniel ran downstairs. The mirrors lining the hallways cracked one by one, each releasing a burst of warm wind and a fleeting voice. "I was Helen, thank you. My name was Elias. You remembered me." The trapped memories were escaping, but the house didn't like that. As Daniel reached the main hallway, the front door slammed shut and the locks twisted in reverse. The chandeliers swayed wildly. Portraits screamed without sound. The stairs cracked apart behind him. The house was collapsing inward, but it wasn't just breaking, it was decaying, like a corpse after death, melting into itself. Daniel turned the corner, and stopped. The girl from the mirror stood in the hall. She wasn't crying, she looked calm, clear. "Real, you did it," she said. "You broke the eye. But it's not over." She pointed to the basement, beneath the cellar, down the spiraling stairs, back into the chamber of mirrors. Only one was left intact, the towering one, the heart of the house. It gleamed, untouched, while the room rotted around it. Daniel approached, and saw his reflection change. It wasn't him anymore, it was his uncle. Then his father. Then himself again, but older, broken. Hollow-eyed. "It can rebuild if this remains," the girl said. "Burn it." Daniel hesitated. The mirror whispered, "Stay. We'll make you forget the pain. We'll make you whole." He picked up a broken shard of glass, and stabbed it into the base of the tall mirror. It cracked, then screamed. A deep, inhuman wail filled the house as the mirror began to dissolve like salt in water. The light inside the mirror burst, the walls groaned. The foundation split. The mirrors above shattered in waves like lightning traveling up the spine of the house. Daniel ran, through collapsing halls. Flaming rooms. Twisting corridors that fought to keep him inside. He made it to the front door, turned the knob, it opened. He didn't look back. In the early morning light, Daniel stood in the field. Behind him, Heroic House collapsed inward in slow, agonizing silence. No fire, just rot, just age returning all at once. It was like watching a memory die. The house crumbled to dust, and then it was gone. Daniel bolted from the basement, the echoes of the journal still crawling through his mind. The house chooses who stays. But as he reached the second-floor landing, something had changed. The hallway was longer than before. Windows that had once lined the walls were now solid, seamless panels of wood. The doors on either side had vanished. The wallpaper peeled like skin. A low hum filled the air, growing louder, like a heart beating from beneath the floor. The house had shifted. It wasn't a building anymore, it was alive. And it knew he was trying to leave. Daniel turned left, the hallway looped, he ran straight. It curved, every turn took him back to the same spot, the top of the staircase. But now, the staircase was gone, swallowed into the floor. Panic rose in his throat. His breath fogged in the suddenly frigid air. The lights overhead flickered and buzzed like angry hornets. He pressed his palm to the wall. It was pulsing. Breathing, a whisper brushed past his ear. "You were chosen, Daniel. Like the others, you belong to the house." In the far end of the hall, a mirror appeared. She was there, the girl, pale, silent, watching. Daniel stepped closer. "You want out," she said softly. Her voice didn't echo like the house. It was clear, almost kind. "I can show you the path." The mirror flickered, and behind her, Daniel saw a doorway. Real, bright, leading into sunlight. His fingers trembled. "What's the price?" he asked. She tilted her head. "A memory." Daniel blinked. "What memory?" "One you cherish. The one that hurts the most. Your mother. Her voice. Daniel's heart stopped. The only real memory he had left of his mother was her humming in the garden when he was a boy. Daniel's eyes welled with tears. The house was closing in. The walls were creeping forward, the ceiling sagging with damp black mold. A low rumble shook the floor beneath him. He closed his eyes. Take it. The girl nodded, reached through the mirror, touched his forehead. The hum vanished, so did the song in his mind. He couldn't remember the melody. Couldn't even remember what her voice had sounded like, but the mirror cracked, and the door appeared. He didn't hesitate. Daniel ran. The door led down a spiral staircase made of light and dust, each step crumbling behind him. The moment he stepped through the final doorway, he was outside, in the woods behind the house. Morning light streamed through the trees. The house stood behind him, still, silent, watching. He turned away. He couldn't remember why he felt so empty, but he was free, wasn't he? 10 years later, the town had forgotten the name of the man who once lived in the house on Grayer Hill. People said it was finally empty, rotted through, condemned by the city. Locals crossed the street to avoid it. Children dared each other to touch the gate and run. Realtors listed it 3 times. No buyers, no visitors, until now. A new family arrived in a gray van, tires crunching on the gravel path that hadn't been used in years. They were young, a couple with 2 small children, chasing each other with chalk and juice boxes. To them, the house was a fixer-upper, a chance to start over. They didn't know what was buried in the walls. The father, Marcus, stood at the threshold and frowned. The door had been unlocked, the floors groaned beneath his feet like a voice murmuring beneath the wood. His wife joked that the place had character. That night, they lit candles and had dinner on the living room floor. The youngest, Lily, wandered upstairs. She found a mirror in a sealed room behind a wardrobe. The glass was clouded, its frame cracked. And yet, she stared into it for a long, long time. When her parents found her, she smiled up at them. He says we're going to like it here. Inside the mirror, behind the rippled silver, a figure stood. His hands were pressed to the glass, his face blank, his eyes moved with Lily's. Watching her. Tracking her. It was Daniel, but he wasn't the man who once tried to escape. His skin was pale like candle wax. His mouth never moved, but whispers filled the room. If you listened closely, you could still hear his mother's song, fractured, broken, looping endlessly, and behind him. Shadows shifted in the reflection, dozens of them, others who had once lived, once remembered. Now forgotten. That night, Lily woke up to the sound of humming. A low, familiar tune. But she didn't know from where. She stood in front of the mirror. Daniel stared back. We were waiting for you, he whispered, and the glass began to ripple like water. Her hand moved on its own, slowly lifting to touch it. And the moment her fingers brushed the surface, the mirror smiled. The house feeds again. Daniel has become part of the house, part of the curse. The cycle restarts, with a new family, a new child, a new memory to take.
If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a lot to me.